Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome to our course Globalization and Spread of English. Our today's lecture's topic is the role of English as the language of administration and press. So before we start our today's topic, just recap what we have discussed in our previous lecture, English language as a lingua franca. We are discussing under this course. Uh, we have discussed about the multilingualism or multilingualism. Apart from multilingualism, we have discussed about the globalization of English language or English as a lingua franca. The need for finding a language that will act as a lingua franca and assistive language that helps people to communicate with one another, that facilitate the different nations and different community members to communicate in a better way by using single code, by using a single language. In the past, there have been many lingua francas, as we have discussed in our previous lectures: Latin and French, Spanish and Greek, these sorts of languages. Latin was remain the language of supremacy or hegemonic position was maintained during the 17th to 18th, 17th to 20th century. Then the era of French language came, and French was being used as international language of diplomacy all over the world in that era. Then the French culture was such in many areas. French became the language of the educated. Well, means the people of educate, the people of elite class or educated people. They used French language for the communication purpose, or the lower classes used Russian language over there in Russia for the communication purpose. But the language of the elite class, the language of the educated class, was remained French language. French became the main language of the culture, diplomacy, and commerce until the middle of the 20th century, when it was replaced by English. So when 20th century starts, or it was what we can say, English was trying to compete other competitor languages like Latin, French, like French or Spanish. So with the passage of time, as the different events became the cause of the decline of other languages like French or Spanish or Latin. So English got the supremacy position over the other language. It was about the 20th century, and it became the lingua franca for all throughout the world. Since we live in the age of globalization that has a great impact on all aspects of life and influences languages, English language is given a special role of a global language. According to the crystal, a language acquires the status of a global language when it is given a role that is recognized in every country. So we can see, we can observe that there are many countries, and it will not be wrong to say that majority of the countries we can find out the English speaker or non-native English speakers. Even we have discussed already that the non-native speakers are greater in numbers than native speakers of English language. So moreover, Swan and Sargent define global language as a single code to unite the peoples around the world linguistically. A single language that is being used throughout the world to communicate with one another. To consider a true global language, a crystal defines that the language must possess three characteristics. If we say a language is a global language, so what are the three major characteristics of that particular language must be over there? Majority of people in some countries or adopted as an official language, priority in language teaching. So we can see majority of the people in different countries, we can find out the people are speaking English language, as we have discussed right now, that non-native speakers of English language are greater in numbers as compared to native speakers of English language, or adopted as an official language, we can find out the examples. Many countries where English has been English is being used as an official language or priority in language teaching. When we talk about the teaching of different languages, so we can take examples of our own country Pakistan, or we can take example of Bangladesh, India, and different other countries that we know. We can get the figures also, or we can say that the languages, although different other languages are also taught, but English languages has become the priority of the institution also to teach their learners English language so that they can compete, so that they can get good jobs, so that they can get good, even they can go abroad for higher studies. So if their English will be better, so it has become the priority of the institutions to adopt this language or to teach this language to their learners. So it is fair to say that at present English meets all these criteria. You can see these all three things we can observe throughout the world. English language is the language of administration in different organizations. Let's see, talk about different organizations where English is being used as a lingua franca, or English has become the language of their communication. The League of Nations was the first of many modern international alliances to allocate a special place to English in its proceedings or in their events or their, what we say. English was one of the two official languages. The other was French, and all documents were printed in both in English and in French. The League was created as part of the Treaty of Versailles in 1920, and at the time of its first assembly, it had 42 members, several from outside Europe, and the importance of a lingua franca with such an extending membership was obvious. There were 42 countries and 42 different language speakers. So how could they communicate with one another? So the best solution that was came at that time to adopt this language as a means of communication. The league was replaced in 1945 by the United Nations, where the role of the lingua franca became even more critical, even more essential. The United Nations now consists of over 50 distinct organizations, programs, and specialized agencies, as well as many regional and functional commissions, standing committees, expert bodies, and other organizations. English is one of the official languages with all other these structures. Official or working role of English in the events of the most other major international political gatherings in all parts of the world. So here you can see some more examples. The Association of Southeast Asian Nations, the Commonwealth, the Council of Europe, the European Union, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. English is the only official language of the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, for example, and the only working language of the European Free Trade Association, that's called EFTA. As concerned the OPEC, Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, it is a permanent intergovernmental organization, and it was developed in Baghdad Conference in September 1963 by its founding members, five founding members. There were at that time Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Venezuela. Next is the EFTA. EFTA, it is the intergovernment organization of Iceland, Liechtenstein, Norway, and Switzerland. It was also set up in 1960. So the official language of these two major organizations was the only English language. From that time, it was these organizations set up and still continue the official language as English. Arabic speaking states or only Spanish speaking states, the choice of lingua franca has to be made. The English is the first choice for most of the people. Even the restricted membership meeting recognize the value of English, although their proceeding may not be expressed in English. So maybe their proceeding or events they are conducted at that time in their local languages or in their own national languages, but the reports they issue for the wider public uh, at the end of their meeting, the reports are published in English language, and the statements which their officials make to the world media usually are in English language. In 1995 to 6, there were about 12,500 international organizations in the world. A sample of 500 of these made official use of languages far as more than any other language. French was the only other language to show up strongly with 49% using it officially. 30 other languages also attracted occasional official status, but only Arabic, Spanish, and German achieved 10% of recognition as a language of their administration. This reliance is especially noticeable in Asia and the Pacific, where about 90% of international bodies carry on their proceedings or their events entirely in English. Many scientific organizations, such as the African Association of Science Editor, the Cairo Demographic Center, the Baltic Marine, are also English only. By contrast, only a small number of international bodies, 13%, make no official use of English at all. Just 13% the 13% international bodies, they are not using English as official language. Most of these are French organization and they use the Francophone or French language in their proceeding or in their organizations when they conduct their meetings, etc. Several bodies use English in more than one way. For example, the Afro-Asian Rural Reconstruction Organization has three official languages, English, Arabic, and French, but for its working language, it uses only English language. Europage, which unites the Yellow Pages publishers of the European Union, placed Dutch, English, French, German, Italian, and Spanish, almost around six languages as official language, but adds that only English is to be used for correspondence for their communicative purposes. Europage actually is a major search platform in Europe, or Europe which helps the entrepreneurs or professionals to gain visibility and qualified business contacts. They can get contacts of qualified professionals through this platform. The overall impression is that whenever a new organization is established or a new organization is set up by different community members, English is chief auxiliary language. English is a major source of communication. The Indian Commission of Jurists recognizes Spanish and English. The German Anatomical Association, Anatomische Gesellschaft, recognizes German and English. The Arab Air Carriers Association recognizes Arabic and English. A different kind of role for English is encountered at the meetings where a large number of nations each has the right to participate using its own language. The European Union is the most complex example of this, where already by 1996, 15 member states were presenting a situation in which over 100 pairs of language translations and interpreting services are required. For example, a pair of French and English, or pair of French and German, French and Finnish. So we continue the process of their meetings. They need more than 100 translators. So to avoid all this complicated situation and to make the communication process in a smooth way, the only solution they got that the English is being used throughout their meetings in European Union. English as the language of press. Qatar Al Jazeera is currently one of the largest international TV networks in the world. Originally an Arab only news channel, it has had a dramatic expansion in recent years. It became known to a much wider audience in the immediate aftermath of the September 11 attacks, or 9/11 attacks, what we can say, when it broadcast video and audio messages purportedly from Al Qaeda. Hardly, or to some extent, we can say it was seen Al Qaeda's preferred vehicle for their messages to their outer world. Al Jazeera began to establish itself as a news channel with its own marked non Western identity and as an alternative to global networks like CNN or BBC World. The popularity of the news channel continued to grow in the following years, and to the point that in November 2006, Al Jazeera decided to launch a new channel, Al Jazeera English. In English language, they took the decision to start their new channel, and that would be definitely in English language. Otherwise, there was the Arab language of that channel, Al Jazeera. The reason behind the selection of a new Al Jazeera English channels was that because the English language has become the global language, and if they want to spread their in news, or they want to convey their message to a large audience, they need to adopt this language, or they need to start, or they need to launch their new English channel. So that's why they started their new English channel in 2006. Or it wasn't matter of their affection with the English language, it was a need of our to adopt or to use that language for their channel. So in effect, while Al Jazeera was already an international news channel, the ability to broadcast in English would make it much more than just international, it would make it global. So as its own website states, Al Jazeera English is the world's first global English language news channel to be headquartered in the Middle East. The English language has been an important medium of the press for nearly 400 years. I'm sorry. As early as the first decades of the 17th century, several European countries were publishing rudimentary newspapers, but censorship, taxation, wars, and other constraints allowed little growth. Progress was much greater in Britain, though even in that country, periods of the censorship greatly limited newspaper content until towards the end of the century. The 19th century was the period of greatest progress thanks to the introduction of new printing technology and new methods of mass production and transportation. It also saw the development of a truly independent press, chiefly fostered in the USA, where there were some 400 daily newspapers by 1850 and nearly 2,000 by the turn of the century. With the emergence in 1856 of the New York Associated Press, which later developed into the Associated Press, the majority of the information being transmitted along the telegraph wires of the world was in English. According to the data compiled by the Encyclopedia Britannica in 2002, about 57% of the world's newspapers were being published in those countries where the English language has special status, and it's reasonable to assume that the majority of these would be in English language. A similar story could be told in relation to the publication of periodicals, magazines, pamphlets, digests, and other ephemera. Ephemera are the objects that are created for a short period of time or temporarily, that are designed, or what we can say a one-day newspaper, or but poster for one event, or luggage labels that is attached with our bags, that is used for a single journey. So in all these things, English is the main source of communication, or main source of English language is the only option for all these things. About a quarter of the world's journal magazines are published in English status countries. So all these figures tell us there's all kinds of publication, of course, literary reviews, hobby journals, comics, fanziness, or pornographies. Pornographies or vulgar literature, technical reviews, scholarly journals are published in English language. A visit to any university library shows in any country most academic journals with an international readership are published in English. In the 1990s, the journal Linguistics abstracts were reviewing the content of over 160 linguistics journals worldwide, and nearly 70% were published entirely in English language. So it's end of our today's lecture.